We are going to have a delightful evening, a talk in Little Stonington, a talk on fascinating Turkey, gateway between Asia and Europe, battleground of the world, home of exotic dress, delicious food, and a rich culture unknown to most Americans. But not to our speaker this evening. Ann Fix will share with us her intimate knowledge of the families of the country, of their food, and of their approach to life that makes their land so very intriguing. Ann began to unlock the secrets of this complex world as a girl staying with a Turkish family in Istanbul. Its strong mother soon realized how Ann would benefit her children, inviting her for years of mutual visits. The families treasured each other. Ann opened a shop selling Turkish items here in Stonington. How fortunate we are tonight to share Ann's deeply life-enriching Turkish experience. You're on. Okay.
Thank you, Harry. I don't think I have to say anything now.
Oh, hold questions, please, until the end. Thank you.
Thank you, Harry, also for encouraging me to pursue this topic. And thank you to Millie and the Stonington Free Library for hosting and supporting this talk. Merhaba ve hoş geldiniz. Hello and welcome. Why Turkey is a question I have been asked on many occasions once I reveal my love for the country. Many people know of my long-time love affair with the country. Many know I was a summer exchange student to Turkey in high school. And many still wonder how a timid 16-year-old came to regard a warm, boisterous Mediterranean country with such affection and for so many years. It is difficult to pinpoint when culture, hospitality, food, and friendships all contribute to my love for the country. Maybe it was that I was 16 and it was my longest trip away from home and overseas. But Turkey made a huge impression on me, and this was all due to AFS. American Field Service was a cherished part of my high school years. My family had hosted Paul, a student from England, for a year just before I went, so I was already involved in the program. I always wished to travel to foreign countries, so I applied for the American Field Service Summer Abroad program. AFS is a unique program started by ambulance drivers during World War I to provide humanitarian aid to wounded soldiers on both sides of the conflict. It continued this service through at the beginning of World War II. In 1946, AFS volunteers from both World Wars transformed the organization into a secondary student exchange program created to foster understanding between U.S. teenagers and their counterparts in Europe and beyond. It focused on homestays with families. Students were matched with a family depending on the profile and the interests of the host family and the host student. Apart from knowing that Turkey was part of the ancient world that I had just studied in history class, I didn't really know what place it held in the world. I came to understand that Turkey has had an essential role where Christianity and Islam meet, where the Black Sea links the world through the Bosphorus Straits, the Sea of Marmara, the Dardanelles, and flows into the Aegean and the Mediterranean seas, sites of many strategic and tragic battles, and that Istanbul is the crossroads of Europe and Asia, a long-time stronghold of NATO, and for many centuries, a cultural and historic giant. I had no idea that over the coming decades, I would travel along most of its coastlines and far-reaching borders with Armenia, Georgia, Iran, and Syria. The Turkish AFS chapter sent us a pamphlet in advance of our arrival, which had a few good helpful hints. One said, "Clear out all the preconceived options you have about Turkey. You will find out it is not desert with people riding camels around after all." That I found funny. Little did they know that one of the current AFS students in southeastern Connecticut, Haluk, was from Turkey, and he used to delight in telling people that he rode a camel to school. I had a fascination with camels, which I made known, and at one point during the summer, Niazi, my Turkish father, swerved to the side of the road, and I got to ride on a donkey and a camel. My Turkish family wanted someone who was comfortable on the water to sail on their sailboat, and a girl about the ages of their own. I grew up in Groton Long Point, sailing in the lagoon and Fishers and Long Island Sounds. However, to this day, I have not lived down the time I was seasick when we traveled for 3 weeks on their boat called Kaygasis, or Carefree. The Aegean is not Fishers Island Sound. The family just assumed that anyone who could sail would not be susceptible to 10-foot rolling waves in the Aegean. As many sailors will know, this is far from true. This story even appeared in part of my Turkish father's biography, so it will continue to live for a long, long time. That summer was a grand adventure, as well as an eye-opening experience into a new culture and in learning more about what inner resolve I had and how resilient I would become. We lived on board Kaygasis for nearly a month, with several inland trips along the way. Kaygasis was about 35 feet long, with open bunks, one toilet, and a small galley. The hired captain slept in a separate area down the front hatch, so there was not much escape from family life. Talk about immersion. It goes without saying that it was beautiful to be on the Aegean, stopping along the coastline at night, seeing dolphins frolicking in the waves, but it was not without family drama. I learned that Turks are an emotive people in their language and gesticulations. I learned that Turkish people love to laugh and tell jokes. I learned later to laugh at my own humbling mistakes, of which there were many that summer. For example, I've been told that in Turkey you must eat everything and finish all the food that's put in front of you. I didn't realize they didn't mean the Turkish coffee, which on my first night with my family, I drank the whole cup, grounds and all, and thought, oh my, yuck, how will I survive 3 months of this? It certainly was a good icebreaker for the coming months together. Another fondly retold story at my expense. We saw a lot of the coastline that summer, from Izmir on the Aegean to Marmaris on the Mediterranean, and saw George Bass, the well-known naval archaeologist who was diving off the coast at a shipwreck called Serçe Limanı. It was thrilling to see the divers up close and what they had found. As an aside, George Bass was part of Texas A&M's Institute of Naval Archaeology, which my brother Peter coincidentally has been involved with for decades. This was my first brush with archaeology. We visited many ancient sites that brought history to life. I saw the ruins of Troy and had the obligatory tourist photo taken in the Trojan horse. This early travel sparked my curiosity and furthered my desire for deeper travels in the country. I learned so much that summer of 1978, and when I returned, I realized that I had changed. I found an entry in my journal vowing to do well in my senior year and turn my grades around, which I did and was accepted to my first choice, Wheaton College, maybe in part due to my essay, which outlined my unique summer in Turkey. It said, quote, living in a Eurasian country with a Muslim family who spoke little English, touring ancient ruins, eating different foods, and participating in unknown customs made me more aware of myself, the people around me, and the peoples of another country. It was an apt summation. And now let me talk a little bit about my life over the years, and you'll see how Turkey has been with me every step of the way, along with a few other countries. In college, I decided to major in Italian and did my junior year abroad in Florence, Italy, where I had to take my final exams as orals in front of a university panel. I don't believe I would have found the courage to do that had I not had the experience in Turkey. After graduation, I found a job at an Italian fashion house in Manhattan. I dealt with all the international retail entities which carried the brand and the production factories all over the world. I was happy to be traveling and using my international understanding, skills, and language. Living in New York City in the 80s was exciting. I was working, traveling to Asia and Europe a few times a year, and yet Turkey always drove me back. I returned to my Turkish family whenever the opportunity arose. I signed up for Turkish night classes at NYU, and for the next few years was engaged in properly learning the language. In 1994, I married and began trailing Kevin to international postings to Singapore and London, taking my fashion role with me. I had to adjust to being on the ground rather than speaking with a New York City-centric viewpoint. When we returned to New York, young Christopher in tow, I switched gears from fashion to food. International flavors have always inspired me. The seasonal approach to food, the consideration for preparation, and the beauty of the presentation were all things that I sought to bring to how I cooked. I started a personal chef service called Wild Lime and Thyme, cooking weekly meals for clients. I continued with that throughout the arrival of our second son, Alexander, and until I moved to India a few years later. India brought another series of challenges, as you may imagine, but I found many comparisons to Turkey. Through a connection with another family at the boys' school, I took on a role at a new hypermarket as the wine and specialty food buyer. Returning to the US in 2007, and to Stonington this time rather than New York, with 2 boys in tow, I reassessed my mosaic career. I had once used the word checkered at the boys' school here and was met with raised eyebrows. After I explained what it meant, the teacher said, "No, dear, we like the word mosaic." As I love mosaics in the churches and mosques, it seemed a much more apt word to adopt. Mosaic happened again as I opened a shop on Water Street here in the borough in 2012, importing Turkish and Indian textiles. I've always managed the challenges of various countries by the beauty in textiles. My love of textiles helped me connect the dots from that which I loved in Turkey and admired in India. My Turkish father's sister, Sabiha, was a well-known collector of Turkish traditional clothing. I was dazzled by these garments worn by Ottoman women and was fortunate enough to acquire one on my first trip. She wrote many articles, one of which was about the Turkish hammam or bath. If you're familiar with my shop, it was created around Turkish bath towels and other items used there. Her life and passion inspired me, and she became a sort of fairy godmother for the shop. Sabiha's profile, dressed in one of her traditional Ottoman kaftans, was on the 50 kurush coin back in the mid-1970s, making her the first civilian with the likeness on a coin. I still have one nestled in my jewelry box as a memento. My shop, Yali, is named for the gorgeous old wooden houses which dot the Bosphorus and are used as summer retreats during the Ottoman times. Yalis are home to pashas and princesses and are filled with glorious textiles, tilework, ceramics, and the like. It seemed fitting that in a historic village along the coast in Connecticut with precious wooden houses filled with antiques and beautiful artwork might be a likeness, if you squint, for my beloved Bosphorus. The realization that I could fearlessly try to open such a shop was the culmination of all my previous experience. In Yali, I created a place where I could talk about Turkey as much as I wanted, sharing stories and sharing my love for all things Turkish. I had come full circle from not knowing much about a country to having that country be part of my life every day, for which I am thankful. I've had the fortune and pleasure to return many times in the past years to visit Turkey, with Kevin and the boys when they were young, on trips to Cappadocia, Bodrum, and the Mediterranean coast, to Kaş and Kalkan, and of course, Istanbul to meet with my Turkish family. We've traveled from the west coast to the eastern frontiers by car, jeep, boat, and bus. Kevin was able to visit the site of Gallipoli, the tragic battle of 1915, which forged the identity of his native Australia. We visited ancient sites with magnificent examples of temples, theaters, and forums. Our favorite trips involve sailing on the Mediterranean in gulets, small wooden sailboats derived from the old sponge diving boats and now built as comfortable cruising yachts. Anchoring in pine coves and dining under the stars from Göcek to Antalya is a magical experience. We visited Göbekli Tepe, deemed the oldest known settlement in civilization. We've traveled the ancient caravan routes on the Silk Road and visited caravanserais built in the 13th century to house merchants. We've walked along roads traveled by St. John, as well as roads and bridges built by the Romans. We've glimpsed Mount Ararat, where Noah's Ark is believed to have rested. We've driven through high pasture lands, 2,700 meters above sea level. We've visited modern cities and humble villages. It is such a vast and diverse country, full of natural beauty, interesting and varied historical sites, and very friendly and hospitable people. These trips have taught me how people live in an area much different than our corner of Connecticut. As wonderful and enriching as all those trips have been, they take a back seat to my friendship with my Turkish family. To this day, my Turkish mother, Meral, still introduces me as her third daughter. I've been fortunate to return many times since that first encounter. However, each time I returned in the 1980s while I was working in New York City, she would be most concerned about my marital status, or rather lack of it. On one visit, we went to a very famous mosque, Eyüp Jami, to pray for a husband. I learned later it was the Mosque for Lost Causes. It gets better. Should your wish or prayer come true, you usually sacrifice an animal as an acknowledgement of the wish being granted. It was decided that my case wasn't too dire, so only a rooster would be needed to be sacrificed. Well, needless to say that when my parents and friends learned of this, I received roosters in many guises. Roosters, roosters, and more roosters. Meral would also manage to find eligible Turkish men who were traveling to New York City to call on me, always veiled with a gift from her, which I would have to painfully retrieve over coffee. When I met Kevin in New York, I'm sure on one of the first dates, Turkey would have been included in the conversation. I was thrilled that not only had he been there on earlier travels, but they had expressed an interest in returning. A few months after that first date, I had been invited to visit my Turkish family and bravely asked if he'd like to go along. He was keen to go, yet he had no idea what he was in for. He had met my younger Turkish sister Deniz when she visited us in New York City, but he had not encountered my Turkish mother. She is a very strong-minded and determined woman. When we stopped at the pharmacy to introduce Kevin, I noticed that my Turkish sister Deniz had disappeared. After the formalities over coffee, she boldly pinned Kevin up against a display cabinet and said in loud and broken English, "When will you marry Anne?" He demurred by saying, "Well, we haven't really known each other for that long." And she said, "Baba and me, 3 weeks, plenty of time." We did become engaged 3 months later, for which she still takes full credit. Each time we are in Istanbul, we visit her in her pharmacy, always for a coffee, a quick catch-up, and a photo. History, family, and now, perhaps my most important bond to Turkey, food. Turkey was also the starting point for my journey with food. Visiting my first outdoor farmers market was to develop a love for seasonal and abundant produce. My journal has many musings of open-air markets, back streets, butchers, cheese shops, olive shops, spice shops, and notation on how to prepare various eggplant dishes. My dad loved eggplant and had it growing in our garden, which is probably why there's so many eggplant recipes. In many countries since, markets have always provided an insight into local life. I've dragged Kevin through markets all over Turkey. For me, it is a way to understand the local culture, and if you've ever witnessed a market in high season, the color and variety is astounding. My Turkish mother taught me how to make a few specialties. She taught me how to stuff grape leaves, make bulgur pilaf, and a dish called börek. If you've been a guest at our house, you know that börek is my signature dish. That summer, I watched my Turkish grandmother make lokma, small dough balls fried and dipped in sugar syrup, which was a treat for afternoon tea. Food and the planning of menus is always a topic of conversation when we are in Turkey, and if truth be told, in our house as well. My family enjoys eating Turkish food, and so do my guests. I hope. Tea is an important daily ritual in Turkey. Turkish tea is grown around the Rize area in the Black Sea. It is taken with kahvaltı, or breakfast, which literally means before coffee. A Turkish breakfast is my favorite and most photographed of meals. It usually consists of bread or samit, a sesame bread roll, variety of olives, cheeses, jams, tomatoes, cucumbers, and herbs. Tea is drunk throughout the day in small tulip-shaped glasses. The tinkling of spoons against the glass is a sound which always brings a smile to my face whenever I hear it. Oops. Drinking tea is a chance to gather with friends or family and take a pause during the day, sometimes accompanied with salty or sweet biscuits and a lot of chat. There is an expression which says, tea without conversation is like a sky without a moon, and it is indeed always nicer with friends. Whereas cafe or coffee is taken on its own, accompanied by a small glass of water and a piece of lokum, Turkish delight. It is also an important ritual in engagement and wedding customs. When the groom-to-be comes to ask for the bride's hand in marriage, both families are present. The hopeful bride prepares coffee for the families lovingly and beautifully prepared and presented. However, playfully, the groom's is spiked with salt. The test being how he handles surprises. If he can drink it down without complaint, he shows a sense of humor and patience. Early on, after I drank the grounds, my own show of patience and sense of humor, it was one of the things I was taught to make. There is even the ritual of reading the coffee grounds. In my case, anyone in my Turkish family reading mine would foresee me finding a tall, dark, and handsome Turk to spend my life with. Even so, I ended up liking Turkish coffee so much that Baba presented me with my own Turkish coffee grinder. The making and sharing of coffee is a reflection of Turkish culture, hospitality, and respect for family, friends, and acquaintances. Cooking and eating Turkish food may be easy, but oh, that language. The Turkish language is a challenging one that I've tried many times to master, even online during COVID. Yet I still fall short, but it's a lifetime project. Turkey has a special talisman, the nazar boncuk, or evil eye bead. It is very serious business, and a large one hung in front of a house with the eye facing outward protects the house and its occupants from any sort of evil doings. Should it break, it has protected against someone perpetrating a bad deed. Babies are decked in the front and the back so no one can curse them from either side. They're worn as jewelry, hung from rearview mirrors, embedded in sidewalks, and stamped, painted, and emblazed on any surface you might imagine. There are many phrases said to ward off the nazar, and there are many writings on the subject. At Yali, each purchase is tied with a small evil eye to bring the buyer good luck. They adorn our house in many places, and we travel with them tucked inside of our suitcases. You can never have enough good luck or evil eye protection. So you can see how much of part of my life Turkey has become. For me, arriving in Istanbul always feels like a homecoming. Though the population has grown from just 2.6 million when I first went that summer in 1978 to over 15 million in 2025, I still visualize the old city resplendent in domes, cobbled streets, mosaics, and covered bazaars. A little thrill zings through me whenever the city is mentioned, a place caught in time, yet advancing through the 21st century. Cats are ubiquitous to the streets of Turkey. Aside from exploring the back streets of this glorious city, we always enjoy a ferry ride on the Bosphorus, zigzagging from Europe to Asia. And it is common to buy tea on the ferry and throw pieces of bread to the seagulls. This is where my Yali shorefront villas come to life. Many have stood the test of time, and the light playing on the water and reflected in their windows is magical. It has captured the imaginations of artists, poets, and songwriters throughout the centuries. I was thrilled that my late parents, Marcia and Jack, were able to finally meet my Turkish sister Deniz on a few occasions, and my Turkish parents as well. We had a spirited dinner one night in 2003 at our New York apartment with the three of them, my parents, Kevin, me, and our boys. After that, my father wrote an email to Niazi, and one line sticks out. You have been so kind to Anne for so many years, and we do appreciate it very much. You're responsible for so much of what she has become, and we thank you. These communications between my father and my Turkish father exemplify all that AFS was hoping to achieve. It took a leap of faith and open minds on both sides of this experience for this to happen. I was not to realize until many, many years later how the summer of 1978 was to shape my interests, careers, and passions. Rarely a day passes when I don't think about Turkey. It has shaped who I am and who I hope to be. It's informed my worldview, my sense of family, my self-image, my appreciation of hospitality, and my sense of possibility. Every day I am thankful for how I interact with the world, to having been granted this life-changing experience, and to my Turkish family and friends for teaching me about their history, culture, and accepting me into their fold as one of their own, no borders or boundaries. I'm deeply grateful that Kevin and the boys are open to accepting and sharing this journey with me. Turk AFS also said in that same booklet, do come with an open mind to form your own opinions, which will be of more value to you than any other opinion. It would be my wish and hope that everyone, my family, my friends, and my neighbors, would approach ideas with an open mind and envision how the world could be. Travel shapes one's view of the world and how you comport yourself within it. I hope I've woven the tapestry, or rather mosaic, of my life intertwined with Turkey and my fondness for it. In closing, I would like to leave you with a Turkish idiom. Each cup of coffee shared forges a bond that lasts for 40 years. So here's to a bond that has lasted for more than 40 years and will do so for many, many more. Çok teşekkür ederim. Thank you very much.
Bravo!
And to leave on a sweet note, I'd like to offer you a little bit of Turkish hospitality. There's some locum and your own personal evil eye protection. So I'm happy to try to answer any questions.
Do you have a favorite Turkish expression? You say it's hard, but I'm sure you've learned a few. What's your favorite one?
Batı balık yan gidiyor,
Okay.
which means the fish sunk and swam sideways, which basically means it's already happened, just let it go. Joyce.
Is AFS active at this point?
It is. They're based out of New York, but they've changed the way that they do things. So when I was there, you would just apply and were matched up with the family, which is how I ended up in Turkey. It wasn't necessarily where I thought I wanted to go. Now it's more, you applied to go to one particular place. So it's changed a little bit in that. And they expanded to school programs and all sorts of things as well. So, but they are worldwide still. So. Harry.
And how does your family deal with the enormously complex, challenging political situation, not only Turkey versus the world, but within Turkey and the conflicts and the dictatorship? How do they possibly deal with it? How are they comfortable living in such a challenging place?
Did everybody hear the question? Okay. I think the easiest thing to say is I asked our friend who lives in Antalya that very question years ago when the administration had just won re-election. And he looked at me and basically, it's a question that we don't talk about. And he said, we have to forge our own world. We have to make our own world and our friends and family in it. So it's not quite being an ostrich, but it's the way that a lot of people deal with it because it's hard to know how to handle it.
That's very helpful because that's the way many of us are dealing with our situation here in America.
Very, very similar. Yep. Yep. So, but,
And can you just talk a little bit about your last trip?
the 4x4 off-roading.
Yeah. I mean, where you, maybe you could put the map.
Yep. Let me.
Just tell us where you went.
So we started in Trabzon, which is up here, and we went up to Artven, and then there are big mountains here that go up to 2,700 feet. So we did this whole area, meters, sorry, 2,700 meters. We did this whole area in here, which is a lot bigger than it looks like, and then to Kars, down to Van, and then that was it. But that was 10 days. So it's a 6-hour drive from Kars to Van, straight on highways without stopping. So it's a pretty big distance. But it was amazing. Sure. Yeah. Melissa.
You were to recommend someone to do one trip over to Turkey. Where would you recommend they go?
There are a lot of things dependent on that. So it depends on time.
Some of your favorites.
I would say if you've never been to Turkey before and you only have a small period of time, I would definitely go to Istanbul. And then if you had some more time, depending on whether you like coastal cities, whether you like small cities, whether you want to go on the water, whether you like archaeology, then there could be a lot of other places. I mean, a lot of people do the triangle, which is Istanbul, and where Nevşehir here is Cappadocia, in the center of the country that has all the funny chimneys that are stone chimneys that had caves and everything else that they lived in for a while. That's kind of interesting. Of course, the coastline is really fascinating. So, yeah. It's a lot of coastline, yeah. And it all is really quite spectacular. And there's so much diversity. I mean, just like our country, there's so much diversity. But we can plan that together. Hi, Wick.
In terms of size, is there a state in the U.S. that's sort of comparable in area to Turkey?
Imagine you're going out from New York all the way over to Ohio. So take Pennsylvania, go from New York, cross Pennsylvania, and into Ohio. It's about that size.
Width-wise, from coast to coast, yeah. From border to border, yeah. The response was, if you take the size of Turkey, it's roughly if you went from New York through to Ohio. So that's as wide as it is.
That looks bigger in the map.
It does, yeah.
It looks like the United States.
Yeah.
Where were you with your family?
They were based in Istanbul. But that summer when we went on the Aegean, we went from Istanbul all the way down to Marmaris. And we went back and forth a few times. But anyway. Oh, sorry. Istanbul's up here. So it connects the Black Sea through the Bosphorus Straits, Sea of Marmara, to the Dardanelles, and then this is the Aegean here and the Mediterranean. Scott?
Recognizing that any generalization will have exceptions, what are the cultural differences east to west, north to south?
Well, I'd say it's more internal and coastline are some of the big differences. So the coastline is very westernized, very open-minded for the most part. I'd say that the internal part of the country is much more conservative, and not to use the word old-fashioned, but tradition is much more important there. And then the further east you get, the more conservative it becomes, with a few parts. So the Armenian and Georgia border up where we were near Artven and Kars was at one point in time under Russian rule. So it's got a completely different feel to it, and it's not very liberal, but much more liberal than some of the other parts in the area. So it really just depends. But they have an expression called rakı balık people, which means rakı, which is like ouzo, and balık is fish. So that means that all along the coastline, it's much more Western, open fish people, yeah.
I don't know how to pronounce it correctly, but Persepolis, or what,
Persepolis?
Persian Empire's city, where was that located in Turkey? Or was it in Turkey? In Iran.
Iran.
So I'm, my bad.
No, that's okay.
You correct
It's
it.
that way.
Sorry.
It's off the map.
You showed us
Uh,
a lot of archaeology. Is that what you really like seeing? That's Greek. I mean, that's not really Turkey. Can you explain that?
Do you have all night?
No, not that. But I mean, like I see that red line there is the
That's the border with Greece.
border with Greece. So it's a very. Can you explain a little bit why all of those ruins are there?
Because it was originally a Greek city-states, and then it was Roman, and then it became Seljuk, or Christian, Seljuk, Ottoman. So it's changed hands quite a bit. Derek?
What today is an Ottoman woman? Expression you use.
I was Ottoman dress. So,
Kaftan?
yeah, so it's a kaftan. It's just the way that they put things together. So they would have like a long kaftan over baggy shalvar or pants and a undercut. It's just the what you would imagine, you know, with the turban. If you've seen any of the 17th century painters that did paintings of the hammams and the Turkish baths and the court life, that's sort of what it reminds me of. I can show you pictures later, Derek.
Speaking of the 17th century, where exactly were most of the Turkish carpets woven? With what clans or villages?
All over.
All over? Yeah.
Depends on which carpets. Yeah. So Uşak is probably the most famous, which is here. Uşak. It has a S underneath. Yeah. Great. Well, thank you for coming. Teşekkür ederim.